Alrighty. Well, hey, E-Town, this is Scott Bramley coming to you today to talk a little bit about our situation here with remote learning. And so I figured I would put some videos out maybe once a week in a podcast style that I am totally new to. I've never done this before, but I certainly wanted to have some type of catchy, alliterative name to go with Bramley, and there's just not a lot of good B words to talk about talking and having a conversation with a guest who I will introduce shortly. So I played around with banter, and banter kind of has this connotation of teasing and kind of good-humored nature. There might be some good humor, but I certainly don't want to tease anybody. And I figured blab with Bramley would work, but blabbing means that you're kind of giving away secrets and revealing things. So I don't want to do that. We're giving away some tips, but not necessarily secrets. Blather, kind of what I'm doing now, being long-winded without making sense, and I don't want to do that. And certainly babbling, which is rapid, incoherent speech, and I'm almost there. So I decided that maybe I would go with my first name and do Speaking with Scott, and that seemed rather weak. So I'm going to go with this, and it's not very catchy, but I'm going to go with the Remote Learning Rundown. So brought to you by Scott Bramley. So we're here for the Remote Learning Rundown, and I am honored to be here with our special guest, Leslie Owens, who serves as the Assistant Division Chair for Special Education at Lyons Township High School, District 204. Do you want to say hello and just introduce yourself, Leslie?
Sure. Hi, I am Leslie Owens. I'm the Assistant Division Chair for Special Education at Lyons Township High School, at least until the end of June. And then I will be making a move over to our Student Services Department as the Division Chair. But I have spent the last 13 years of my career at LT. I've been working in the Special Education Department, so it'll be a fresh move for me to a different division. But again, my 13th year at LT.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You beat me to it. You stole my thunder. I was going to say
no.
Congratulations are in order, but that's all good. So happy for you, and really thank you for your time this evening. So just for some context, I'm planning to record and share some of these interviews with experts in the field around various topics. And I wanted to start with a topic that has been very prevalent in the news around FAPE and a free, appropriate public education, and how do we actually have the best service to students receiving special education services during this time of remote learning. So I really appreciate your energy with that.
Sure.
And so, everybody who's watching this knows that the governor in Illinois suspended in-person instruction for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. And so school districts and teachers are just really trying to figure out how to best serve their students during these challenging times. And we're all experiencing this in different ways. So before we get to the business end of this, Leslie, I just wanted to check in on you and see how you and your family are doing and how that's all going for you.
Sure. Thank you for checking in. I feel like that's honestly one of the most important things we can do with one another at this point, and it's something I keep stressing with the staff with whom I work. And yeah, my family's good. I've got 2 children, 4th grade and 1st grade, so that has been an interesting transition to say the least. On one hand, I feel so fortunate that I have a full-time job that I'm still trying to manage while doing remote learning with children, because I know that there are many families that are experiencing job loss right now. So I feel fortunate, but it is such a challenge to try to be doing that. I have, my husband is a healthcare worker, so he's out of the home working, and that leaves kind of all of those duties to me. And I'll just say that some days we feel like we're knocking it out of the park, and then some days I, am just not sure where this is going to take all of us. So we're hanging in there. I hope that the better weather turns things around and gives us a little freedom to at least get out in the yard and maybe feel a little more normal for a few minutes. But we're doing okay.
Well, thank you to you and to your husband for his service. And, I'm glad that everyone's doing pretty okay during this challenging time. So it's about all we can say, right?
Right.
So I reached out to Leslie to learn some tips and ideas for how to serve all students well during this time, especially our students receiving special education services. And ETHS has some amazing faculty members and members of the special education department, and they've been super creative in supporting our students. But we're always looking for new ideas. And so next week's episode, I'll be bringing some local ideas from ETHS teachers, but for this one, I wanted to reach out into the field and see what some other schools are doing, because we can learn from each other. And it's always great to hear how other school districts and other professionals are really trying to figure these things out, especially when it's so difficult to collaborate in person, which is such a rich tradition at ETHS, very collaborative, and people would be swapping ideas, walking through the hallways and, exchanging ideas in our terrace, which is our faculty room, lunchroom, and we just can't do that. So that's why I'm reaching out to you
Sure.
for that. So I'll get started with our first question here. And that's just that was my cool effect. So that's the supporting students who receive special education services, remote learning. Yeah. So there you go. I'm learning all these new things.
I was going to say, we'll all be tech experts by the end of this, right?
Yep. So the questions might be a little obstructed. I'll work on some tech issues on that as we're going through. But if you wouldn't mind, just giving us a little bit of a background on Lyons Township's approach to remote learning, and specifically how the special education staff have been figuring this all out.
Sure. I'll be honest and say that we were probably a little behind the curve when this all hit. Our district is not a one-to-one district, and so students don't automatically have devices, and that was our first hurdle, was when we realized that this was going to be in effect. Just, okay, how are we going to make sure that students have devices in their hands? And then it's one thing to have a device in your hands, but if you don't have connectivity to the internet or Wi-Fi or whatever you need, that device doesn't do a whole lot for you. And so we spent the first days and weeks really just trying to make sure that everyone who needed devices or any kind of connection would be able to get that, so that remote learning could take place. Likewise, we didn't have a great schedule set up, and teachers were kind of just told to, not maybe in these so many words, but do their best and try to get some meaningful learning up and out for their kids. We do use Canvas as a learning management system, and so our learning platform. And so many teachers had used that. It wasn't a requirement though. And so some teachers were really adept and then others weren't. We are lucky to have tech coaches who are teachers for a portion of their day, and they do tech support for the other portion of their day, and more of a tech coaching, not tech support in terms of technical glitches, but more of the learning piece of it. And so immediately our approach has been that a tech coach is on call all day, every day. They set up different like Zoom conferences, chat rooms, whatever is necessary to help teachers. And teachers have learned very quickly how to use a lot of features through Canvas that they weren't using before. And then with Zoom and Google Hangout, and we do use Google for document sharing and things like that. So the approach really now has been refined a bit, so that we're on an A and B schedule, and students have a little less to think about each day. They attend a few classes each day. We don't really have synchronous learning yet. We're still just having teachers post things. They can offer students to meet now at certain times depending on the class period. But that's been a little rockier to roll out than maybe other schools that had piloted some of that on e-learning days throughout the typical school year. So our approach has been that we want students to be engaging in at least some new learning every day, but that we're going to really focus on making sure we're checking in, doing more of those wellness checks, and ensuring that students are engaging with staff in some way, shape, or form, and not worrying so much about grades, worrying more about just learning and the connection between teachers and students and support staff.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I think listeners might be able to resonate with some of those growing pains. We've all been experiencing them, and we certainly had to phase this in over time with a new changing landscape throughout this spring. And so, I think very similarly at ETHS, we've been trying to figure out how to best do this and navigate through the process. So thank you so much for that. Just thinking about your, the staff in your department specifically, maybe share an example or two of just some ways that they're building that connection.
Sure, yeah, I've reached out to our teachers to just check in and see what they're working on, what they're doing. We have some, um, we're a school of 4,000 students. We have nearly 500 students who have some sort of identified disability through an IEP. And within that population, we have a lot of students that especially really struggle with the social and emotional connections. And whether that's because of an emotional disability or diagnosis of autism or what have you, those students we were really concerned about from the beginning, because it's hard for them to relate or build those relationships or connections in person, let alone when there's a computer screen in between. So we have teachers and support staff that have done some really amazing things through Zoom, and just making sure they're connecting in whatever way the family and student feel comfortable. They are posting different fun activities for students to engage in, but it's also a learning activity. So having students watch the same movie clip and give some feedback on social cues that they're picking up or nonverbal cues they're picking up. Interestingly, the remote learning has provided more opportunity for some differentiation and individualization, just because of the way it's being delivered, and kind of the ability that teachers have to modify assignments and have students work on one part of something or not on the other part of something. So in terms of, innovative lessons, teachers are continuing to do the same types of innovative lessons they've always done, whether in person or now online, but they're just able to really hone in on the specific skill that they want a student to work on, because they just have a more control over that and what they're asking the student to actually turn in versus when they're at school. And so I'm just really encouraged by how much teachers have reached out, have sent surveys to students, have figured out what works best for you, and then they're using that in their lesson planning and allowing students to demonstrate their learning in ways that we never would have offered or wouldn't have regularly offered students. And it's allowing students to demonstrate skills that we just haven't seen in person, which has been a really interesting, I guess, silver lining to all of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you so much for bringing that up. I mean, that's such a, it's a positive reframe in a very difficult time. And so it's hard to find those opportunities within the challenges that we face. And so it's very encouraging to hear that as well. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And so I'm gonna move us as well. Whoops, preview. I'm gonna move us as well. So just thinking about one tip or piece of advice that you've given to your staff or you would give to staff during this time. I think people look to us as support staff in the school district, people that they work with and alongside. And so what's some of the advice, one maybe tip that you've given?
I think that part of this is my role and part of this is my interest. I'm a psychologist by training, and social and emotional learning is something that is really important to me and something I've worked on in our school. And I mean, staff is probably tired of hearing me say it. I'm a broken record, but all of this, the most important thing we can be doing is connecting with students. And so when I've had staff call me or email me, or I can just tell that they are beyond stressed out about a certain objective that's not being met or paperwork that didn't get completed the way it typically would, I just say we are prioritizing people over paperwork. And so if you can make a connection with a family or a student, even if it's just a call to say, hey, how was your Tuesday going? And you never talk about math or you never talk about English, that is okay right now, and that's going to pay dividends for that student and for you well into the future. And we will come back to school and we'll figure out how to catch kids up on academic skills. And I know that's even more difficult for students with learning needs who are behind their grade level peers. But again, if they don't feel that sense of safety and connection and know that you are there just caring about them, it really doesn't matter. I have to self-talk for myself with that. I see a to-do list every day that includes my work and all the work that my daughter and son are supposed to do. And my instinct is to check those items off the list and get them done. And oh my gosh, if my son doesn't finish this, journal prompt, what's going to happen? And then I take that deep breath and think, that stuff just doesn't matter as much. I want him to keep improving, but we can work on this at a different time. I don't want to spend the day, stressed out fighting. None of our kids, our families, our parents want to do that either. And I don't want teachers feeling like they have to accomplish the impossible, but just connecting. And if they spend their time doing that, we'll be okay in the end.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That theme is so important, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and I think it resonates with everybody. All right, this one, well, maybe a little bit of a nuance to that is, there's been a lot of conversation in the news, as I mentioned earlier, about guidance from school attorneys, the Illinois State Board of Education, the federal government, and this is certainly on the minds of our staff and our families and about FAPE. And so how has LT handled the requirements and guidance to ensure FAPE for its students during this time? And do you have any advice for our viewers on that?
Sure. Well, it's like everything I said to the last question, keep in mind, but make sure you get all of your paperwork done the right way, right? This is something that obviously we have just been hungry for information, and as I'm sure all of the special educators and administrators in your district have been. I mean, there's not a brief that goes out from ISB or local law firms that we're not just devouring, trying to make sure that we have the guidance we need and that we're doing things to make sure that we are in compliance. And we really have, like I said, just every piece of information we can get, and we're staying on weekly calls with our law firm, and then we have another lawyer who works in our area that has worked with us, and she's been providing some weekly kind of webinar or phone calls just to connect with other districts who are obviously dealing with the same thing. Our advice, it's very clear in the guidance that's coming out through ISB, the federal guidance, and then also more local law guidance that, there's not going to be any official bending on FAPE or any of the requirements for providing an individualized education to students who have disabilities. That being said, they then follow that up with document. So I think what they're telling us is that they understand that we cannot provide services the way we would.
Well, we got a freeze here for a moment. One of the wonderful aspects of Zoom.
No.
There we go. All right, we got
Okay.
Leslie back.
All right. Let me know if that happens again.
We'll just say a train passed by.
Sure.
That used to always happen, right? It disrupted the interference.
The internet, right? It's probably the fact that my daughter has, I think, probably 3 iPads going right now. No, just to say that there will never be a statement that comes out that allows any bending on FAPE or just anyone to say, oh, don't worry about giving kids their individualized education plan. But I think what they're saying is document. And what that means to me is that they understand that there are going to be challenges. And as long as we communicate to families what might be a barrier to giving them the services they are accustomed to, but how we're going to work around that to ensure that their student can continue to receive services and make progress, will be okay. So we just have set up systems for people to be documenting everything they're doing, what they're unable to do based on the need for in-person instruction or service. And we are going to keep working to figure out how we can then deliver that as best we can to catch kids up if there's a loss of progress once they return to the building. I think this is the time period too where everyone is just continuing to learn and figure out and do better as we know better, and we're going to keep doing that through the summer. We already have different plans for our ESY than we had for our remote learning for the end of the school year, and I have no doubt that will continue to evolve a bit and be better, hopefully not for too much longer, but for the duration of this remote learning period.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, I'm hearing from your comments this theme of some different thinking around how to provide this service, but then also partnering with families. There's clear communication and remembering that we still have the responsibility. So sure. I really appreciate that. And legal disclaimer, this is not official guidance on FAPE. No. This is just one person's perspective from the field. So
correct. I am not a lawyer. I am not a representative of ISB or the Department of Education.
So, but thank you. Your opinion is appreciated, and I think it's important that if anybody is watching this, that they recognize that people in the field are dealing with this and struggling with it and trying to figure it out. So I do appreciate
it's tough.
That.
There is an emotional toll that comes with not being able to do your job to the best ability or the way you feel is the best. And so that's something that we are all struggling with, just feeling like we really don't want to shortchange our students, that's for sure. And so how can we get some service to them that still makes a positive impact on their functioning?
Absolutely. Well, we're looking for some pro tips here, Leslie. So we're going to move on to the next one. And bear with me for a second. All right. I can't wait to see how this turns out in my first attempt here. So, but some pro tips. So have you seen or been a part of any activities or lessons or different forms of engagement? You mentioned a lot of connectivity that has been happening, but anything you think our viewers might enjoy or would be able to learn from that you've seen implemented?
Again, going back to some of the just Zoom activities where students are engaging with one another, a lot of our teachers are using Flipgrid, having students upload videos, take pictures of things they're doing, all appropriate, of course, and just trying to, wherever there's a potential for either seeing a student do something or watching a student do something, they're really trying to use that. I don't know that it's anything groundbreaking compared to what every other educator is trying to do, but I think they're just trying really hard. I think at first there was a bit of a hesitation almost to use some of the technology and worries about confidentiality, and it's been helpful to get some guidance that we have signed permission from families to use these mediums so that students can still engage. Trying to think if there's anything that's particularly off the wall or innovative. I think, again, just people using the different features. I was impressed. I was in a large group of about 60 educators, students, and the use of the like breakout rooms so that small group discussion could still be occurring. It's really fairly simple through Zoom, but it was one of those things that made a huge difference and almost made you forget that you weren't together physically. So I was really impressed with that, and students jumped right on that. We've had a lot of live stream shows. We were very lucky to have a thriving LT TV. It's a student-run TV production company or class, and so they've been taking a lot of the activities that students would typically be going to and all the spring stuff, and they're moving it online, and so kids are engaging through social media and watching those. We had a Mr. LT competition that happened all virtually, and there was a lot of participation. So I think those are all things that are working well and getting kids hooked in.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, any semblance of normalcy that we can provide, right? And some connection back to the school. I think we're all scrambling with that. And, great shout out to the LT staff there, student staff for their TV channel. Did you drop a hashtag or an @ in that too? Did I hear you?
No, I did not.
Is there an LT hashtag or @?
Gosh, I don't know. Isn't that terrible? I mean, there's one for our principal who covers all those things at LT Waterman, if anyone wants to check that out. I mean, I'm sure it's just at LTTV or WLTL.
Yeah, the @LT Waterman is, I'm not going to say I'm a subscriber, but I've certainly checked it out before. So I think obviously people will be intrigued by your school district after hearing this, all the viewers en masse. So let's move on.
I have to say, our TV station won an Emmy a couple years ago. So
wow.
If you are, bored during quarantine and want to check out some videos of them being presented virtually before remote learning with an Emmy, check that out.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. So our next question here deals with our paraprofessional staff, and my image there is very intentional. The Superman image there with our paraprofessionals. I know at Evanston Township we are certainly so fortunate to have so many dedicated professionals who serve our students, and this is certainly challenging, especially for our one-to-one parapros who have such an intimate relationship throughout the day with their students and are just so connected to their families and their needs, as well as all of our programmatic parapros who just are so immersed in learning with and helping students learn throughout the day. So this distance is striking and hitting them even harder to some degree. And so I'm curious about LT's work and how paraprofessionals have been connecting with students, and just some advice for everybody watching. How can a special ed department support the parapros during this time?
Yeah, that's been really tough on our paraeducator population. They are helpers, you know, by nature. They just want to be working with students. They miss their students that they work with either one-to-one or the classrooms they support. And we have heard from many of them just saying, if there's anything I can do to help, please, please, please let me know. And I feel like for those first couple of weeks, we were all scrambling just to come up with, you know, what's the plan, and trying to plan for not only teachers and students, but all the support staff we have was a bit overwhelming. And so I feel like we've been able to be a little more deliberate in our planning now to include our paraeducators. So teachers are using Zoom to do some classroom type of instruction. Paraeducators are joining those Zoom conferences. If they are assigned one-to-one para, they are reaching out through phone or email or even Zoom to connect with their students. Even again, if that's just to say, hi, I miss you, I hope you're doing well. But they are still maintaining those connections with families. And then we've already started planning, like I said, for our extended school year, our ESY in the summer for special ed students, and that will be very deliberately including paraeducators who, again, kind of using that breakout room mentality. When teachers need to break into groups with students, paras will be assigned so that each group has a para to work with the students to guide conversation, to answer questions, really just more hands on deck to make sure students are understanding concepts that are being taught. We have quite a few paraeducators that speak a variety of different languages, and so they have been extremely helpful in making calls home and serving as translators during this time period as well. So that's been helpful. We also have a lot of community support that we're trying to provide to families through providing food and meals and things like that. So our paraeducators have been wonderful in volunteering to man stations where people can come pick up food, and really just kind of that all hands on deck kind of mentality. So other than that, we have been giving paraeducators a lot of resources for their own professional development. They have been asking for lots of resources on different topics, so many of us have been searching out some virtual opportunities and passing those along. And I know many of our paraeducators have attended different webinars and different professional learning to enhance their skills for when we do return. So they're making a lot of good use of this time, and again, just hoping to connect as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's another one of those advantages. There's just not a lot of time during the school year, during the day, to for folks to engage in those learning opportunities. So we're doing some similar things in our district, and so it's great to hear. And I think the Zoom idea with having staff in different breakout rooms is pretty cool. So thank you for that. That's a
Sure,
cool
yeah.
tip. All right, so we're getting close to the end here. So, but I think one of the big pieces to our success in our school district is when our general education teachers can just walk down the hallway and check
Right.
in with a special educator or a case manager and just get some tips on how to really serve all students in their classrooms. And again, that's one of the things we're missing. ETHS, this happens all the time, and the collaboration between departments is just so robust. It's certainly something that I feel people are missing. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what recommendations or advice you might offer for our general education colleagues who are working to support all students in their classrooms, especially those students who receive special education services. And have you seen any effective strategies in your district or with your staff?
Sure. We're focused on just making sure that our case managers each have about 15 students that they case manage through special education. And from that end of things, we're making sure that our case managers continue to communicate with their students' general education teachers to let them know that they are still there to be supportive, to answer questions about any accommodations or modifications. Obviously, general education teachers are modifying much of their curriculum at this point, and definitely going off what their typical plan might have been for the rest of the semester. And so they have been reaching out to our case managers, and our case managers likewise towards them, just to ensure that any assignments or units that were modified previously and now have changed a bit are still modified for our students. Again, a little bit of a silver lining of this is that some of the accommodations that were necessary for students because it was in-class learning almost aren't even necessary, because students are able to work at their own pace. They're able to work from home. They can access supports. And so some of our students that struggled in the classroom environment are doing quite well in the remote learning environment and haven't needed some of the support that they had before. But our case managers continue to reach out. They also send reminder emails to their students and families that just because it's remote learning, we are not, you're not foregoing any of those accommodations or those supports. And so whatever we can do to make sure that you continue to get those supports, we will do. Again, case managers kind of just keep checking on their caseload, because they have a much smaller caseload than a general education teacher who's responsible for 120 some kids or whatever the number is each day. And so we're putting a little bit of that responsibility more on the shoulders of the case manager. But again, our teachers are open to helping out, assisting even in a classroom setting. I know that a lot of our related service staff have published their own Canvas pages that include a lot of learning tips, executive functioning, supports for students in the classroom, and have offered to modify or work with any of the general education teachers through their Canvas pages, or their even to come into a Zoom conference to help out if necessary. So again, still kind of doing the same thing, just in a virtual way.
Yeah. Thank you so much for mentioning the related service providers. And I feel that's another group of unsung heroes in our department who either provide direct service provision or connect students to the resources within and the school, and then also within the community. So thank you for mentioning them as well.
Sure. Yeah, they are one of our deepest resources in our department. They seem to just have their finger on the pulse of so many innovative ways to engage with students and kind of fixes for little things that come up that they're probably well overworked at this point throughout the closure, but they have been just instrumental in making sure that kids are engaged.
Yeah. So one follow-up question on what you said, which I'm sure viewers are eager to learn, that I didn't give you in advance. So a little curveball here, but can you briefly, like really briefly, just describe for some context your case management setup, like the structure? You referenced the 15 students, but are they also teaching in the classroom in addition to that case management, and just kind of how that works?
Sure. So like I said before, we hover right between 450 and 475 special education students, and those students are divided up among our special education teachers and some related service personnel on their caseload. And the cap sort of unofficially is at 15 students per teacher. So it is our case managers either teach full-time as well, so 5 sections, or they are a related service provider full-time. And then they carry a caseload of 15 or up to 15, and they are responsible for the IEP compliance, writing portions of the IEP, checking in on the student. It's our goal always that if you're a teacher and a student, we want that student to be in your class. If they're on your caseload, that just doesn't always happen. So teachers obviously use their planning periods or study halls to connect with those students, but that's their kind of caseload.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And then just my last question before we wrap up, a little bit of a sneak preview there, but do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share? Anything you'd like to say to either the ETHS community or the larger community that might view this later on?
No, I think I've said a lot. You're probably going to have to edit this for time. No, I mean, I feel like we're all in this strange boat together, and I am so appreciative that you're doing this, that people are reaching out, that they're trying to connect in so many different ways. And I think I'm probably normal. I hope I'm normal when some days are great and some days are really hard. And what keeps you going is that, you feel everybody kind of struggling through that. And I'm really in a place of positive, energy right now, that we're all going to be in such a different, better place when we come out of this, for having gone through some of these struggles. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think that will resonate, like I said, with a lot of people. Just the themes that you've mentioned tonight about connectivity and being present and reaching out to students, and just never forgetting, as much as we're focused on the academics, we also need to be focused on the social-emotional learning and needs of our students. So thank you so much for your time, Leslie.
Thank you. It's been fun. Good luck with your series.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully I was a strong start and this doesn't kill the series before it begins.
Absolutely. Well, just a sneak preview next time on the remote learning rundown. So you might catch on. Creative connections and remote learning strategies and lessons featuring ETHS teachers. So we'll have a panel
Nice.
of current ETHS teachers and instructional coaches who have just been doing some amazing work with our students. So thanks
Okay,
again,
great.
Leslie. Stay safe and best to your family. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you.
the
You too.
recording here, and then I'll follow up with you real quick.
Sounds good. Thank you. Take care.